The Kraken is a legendary cephalopod-like sea monster of gigantic size in Scandinavian folklore. According to the Norse sagas, the Kraken dwells off the coasts of Norway and Greenland and terrorizes nearby sailors. The sheer size and fearsome appearance attributed to the Kraken have made it a common ocean-dwelling monster in various fictional works. The Kraken has been the focus of many superstitious sailors passing the North Atlantic and especially sailors from the Nordic countries due to their proximity and its Scandinavian origin. Throughout the centuries the Kraken has been a staple part of sailors' superstitions and mythos, being heavily linked to sailors' ability of telling a tall tale. Since the late 18th century, Kraken have been depicted in a number of ways, primarily as large octopus-like creatures, and it has often been alleged that Pontoppidan's Kraken might have been based on sailors' observations of the giant squid. The Kraken is also depicted to have spikes on its suckers. In the earliest descriptions, however, the creatures were more crab-like than octopus-like, and generally possessed traits that are associated with large whales rather than with giant squid. A sea serpent is a type of dragon described in various mythologies, most notably Mesopotamian, Hebrew, Greek and Norse. In antiquity and in the Bible, dragons were envisioned as huge serpentine monsters, which means that the image of a dragon with 2 or 4 legs and wings came much later during the late Middle Ages. Stories depicting sea-dwelling serpents may include the Babylonian myths of Tiamat, the myths of the Hydra, Scylla, Cetus and Echidna in the Greek mythology, and even the Leviathan. In Norse mythology, Jormungandr was a sea serpent so long that it encircled the entire world, Midgard. Some stories report of sailors mistaking its back for a chain of islands. Sea serpents also appear frequently in later Scandinavian folklore, particularly in that of Norway. The Dobhar-chù is a creature of Irish folklore. It resembles both a dog and an otter, though it sometimes is described as half dog, half fish. It lives in water and has fur with protective properties. Her name was supposedly Grace McLaughlin. Her husband supposedly heard her scream as she was washing clothes down at Glenade Loch and came to her aid. When he got there she was already dead, with the Dobhar-chù upon her bloody and mutilated body. The man killed the Dobhar-chù, stabbing it in the heart. As it died, it made a whistling noise, and its mate arose from the loch. Its mate chased the man but, after a long and bloody battle, he killed it as well. The Loch Ness Monster is a cryptid in cryptozoology and Scottish folklore that is said to inhabit Loch Ness in the Scottish Highlands. It is often described as large, long-necked, and with 1 or more humps protruding from the water. Popular interest and belief in the creature have varied since it was brought to worldwide attention in 1933. Evidence of its existence is anecdotal, with a number of disputed photographs and sonar readings. The scientific community regards the Loch Ness Monster as a phenomenon without biological basis, explaining sightings as hoaxes, wishful thinking, and the misidentification of mundane objects. A large eel was an early suggestion for what the monster was. Eels are found in Loch Ness, and an unusually large one would explain many sightings. Dinsdale dismissed the hypothesis because eels undulate side to side like snakes. In a 1982 series of articles for New Scientist, Maurice Burton proposed that sightings of Nessie and similar creatures may be fermenting Scots pine logs rising to the surface of the loch. A decomposing log could not initially release gases caused by decay because of its high resin level. Gas pressure would eventually rupture a resin seal at one end of the log, propelling it through the water. In British folklore, the Beast of Exmoor is a phantom cat said to roam the fields of Exmoor in Devon and Somerset in the United Kingdom. Descriptions of its coloration range from black to tan or dark grey. It has been suggested that the beast may possibly be a cougar or black leopard which was released from a private collection sometime in the 1960s or 1970s after a law was passed making it illegal for them to be kept in captivity outside zoos. The livestock deaths have often been attributed to large dogs, although human attacks on the sheep have also been suspected. The Beast of Bodmin Moor is another phantom wildcat purported to live in Cornwall. Bodmin Moor became a center of purported sightings after 1978, with occasional reports of mutilated slain livestock. The alleged panther-like black cats of the same region came to be popularly known as the Beast of Bodmin Moor. In general, scientists reject such claims because of the improbably large numbers. necessary to maintain a breeding population, and because climate and food supply issues would make such purported creatures' survival in reported habitats unlikely. The Peluda is a supposed dragon or mythical beast that terrorized La Ferté-Bernard, in France, in medieval times. It is said to have come from and lived near the Hoon River near the town. Depending on the account, it had either an ox-sized porcupine-like body or a mess of green hair-like projections hanging from its body that were actually stinger-tipped tentacles which could erect into quills. Its name is derived from this shaggy appearance. The lore proposed that the beast was denied access to Noah's Ark, yet survived the biblical flood by seeking refuge in a cave near the Hoon River. After many years, it returned to rampage across the countryside, wilting crops with its breath and devouring both livestock and humans. It was finally defeated after it killed a man's fiancée. He tracked it down and cut off its tail. This was the only vulnerable point on the beast, and it died immediately. In Basque mythology, Basajaun, meaning Lord of the Woods, is a huge, hairy hominid dwelling in the woods. They were thought to build megaliths, protect flocks of livestock, and teach skills such as agriculture and ironworking to humans. In German folklore, a Wolpertinget is an animal said to inhabit the alpine forests of Bavaria in southern Germany. It has a body comprising various animal parts, generally wings, antlers, a tail, and fangs, all attached to the body of a small mammal. The most widespread description portrays the Wolpertinget as having the head of a rabbit, the body of a squirrel, the antlers of a deer, and the wings and occasionally the legs of a pheasant. The Dahu's principal distinguishing characteristic is that the legs on one side of its body are shorter than the legs on the opposite side, to facilitate standing on and walking on steep mountain slopes. In practical terms, the Dahu's asymmetrical limbs allow it to walk around the circumference of the mountain in only one direction. The Dahu is a staple of 20th-century French popular culture, known in Lorraine, in the mountainous regions of eastern France, and in French-speaking Switzerland as a theme of jokes among natives and a spoof for fooling young children. Its popularity began to soar toward the end of the 19th century. Since the last decades of the 20th century, the Dahu is widely recognized as a fictional creature, a joke, and a metaphor for a tall tale. This legend has been widely perpetuated by Swiss foreign language teachers intending to educate their poor students who have been deprived of the knowledge of the Swiss national animal. In alpine folklore, the Tatzelwurm is a lizard-like creature, often described as having the face of a cat, with a serpent-like body which may be slender or stubby, with 4 short legs or 2 forelegs. The alleged creature is sometimes said to be venomous, or to attack with poisonous breath, and to make a high-pitched or hissing sound. The Tatzelwurm of Austria and Bavaria is described as having poison breath, said even to be lethal. The Brosno dragon is a lake monster which in Russian folklore is said to inhabit Lake Brosno, in western Russia. It is described as resembling a dragon and is the subject of a number of regional legends, some which are said to date back to the 13th century. Rumors of a strange, giant creature living in Lake Brosno have existed for several centuries. One legend says that the lake monster scared to death the Tatar-Mongol army that headed for Novgorod in the 13th century. Batu Khan stopped the troops on the sides of Lake Brosno to rest. Horses were allowed to drink water from the lake. However, when the horses ventured down to the lake, a huge roaring creature emerged from the water and started devouring horses and soldiers. The Batu Khan troops were so terrified that they turned back, and Novgorod was saved. Old legends describe an enormous mouth, devouring fishermen. There are some scientific hypotheses concerning Brosnia. One of them is a gas version saying that when hydrogen sulfide goes up from the lake bottom it makes water boil up. This boiling in its turn resembles a dragon head. But the amount of hydrogen sulfide must be considerable to produce this effect. The vegetable lamb of Tartary is a legendary zoophyte of Central Asia, once believed to grow sheep as its fruit. It was believed the sheep were connected to the plant by an umbilical cord and grazed the land around the plant. When all accessible foliage was gone, both the plant and sheep died. In his book, The Vegetable Lamb of Tartary, in 1887, Henry Lee describes the legendary lamb as believed to be both a true animal and a living plant. However, he states that some writers believed the lamb to be the fruit of a plant, sprouting forward from melon-like seeds. Others, however, believed the lamb to be a living member of the plant that, once separated from it, would perish. The vegetable lamb was believed to have blood, bones, and flesh like that of a normal lamb. It was connected to the earth by a stem, similar to an umbilical cord, that propped the lamb up above ground. The cord could flex downward, allowing the lamb to feed on the grass and plants surrounding it. Once the plants within reach were eaten, the lamb died. It could be eaten, once dead, and its blood supposedly tasted sweet like honey. Its wool was said to be used by the native people of its homeland to make head coverings and other articles of clothing. The only carnivorous animals attracted to the lamb plant were wolves. The Basan is a fowl-like bird with origins stemming from Japanese mythology and folklore. It is said to live in the mountains of Iyo province. According to the description on the illustration, it resembles a large chicken and breathes ghost fire from its mouth. It is described as having a bright red coxcomb and spits an equally brilliant-hued fire. The fire is a cold fire, a glow, and it does not burn. In Japanese folklore, the Tsuchinoko, literally translating to child of hammer, is a snake-like being. Tsuchinoko are described as being between 30 and 80 centimeters in length, similar in appearance to a snake, but with a central girth that is much wider than its head or tail, and as having fangs and venom similar to that of a viper. According to legend, some Tsuchinoko have the ability to speak and a propensity for lying, and they are also said to have a taste for alcohol. Legend records that it will sometimes swallow its own tail so that it can roll like a wheel. The Mongolian deathworm is a creature alleged to exist in the Gobi Desert. The creature first came to Western attention as a result of Roy Chapman Andrews's 1926 book On the Trail of Ancient Man. The American paleontologist was not convinced by the tales of the monster that he heard at a gathering of Mongolian officials. None of those present ever had seen the creature, but they all firmly believed in its existence and described it minutely. It is shaped like a sausage about 2 feet long, has no head nor leg, and it is so poisonous that merely to touch it means instant death. In Mongolian folklore, an Almas is a creature or deity said to inhabit the Caucasus and Pamir Mountains. Nikolai Przewalski describes the Almas, as related to him under the name, man-beast, as follows: "We were told that it had a flat face like that of a human being, and that it often walked on 2 legs, that its body was covered with a thick black fur, and its feet armed with enormous claws, that its strength was terrible, and that not only were hunters afraid of attacking it, but that the inhabitants removed their habitations from those parts of the country which it visited." In Chinese folklore, the Yeren is a legendary creature said to reside in the remote mountainous forested regions of western Hubei. In Himalayan folklore, the Yeti is a monstrous creature. The entity would later come to be referred to as the abominable snowman in Western popular culture. The names Yeti are commonly used by the people indigenous to the region, and are part of their folk beliefs. Stories of the Yeti first emerged as a facet of Western popular culture in the 19th century. According to H. Seeger, the Yeti was a part of the pre-Buddhist beliefs of several Himalayan people. He was told that the Lepcha people worshipped a glacier being as a god of the hunt. He also reported that followers of the Bon religion once believed the blood of the Mirgod, or wild man, had use in certain mystical ceremonies. The being was depicted as an ape-like creature who carries a large stone as a weapon and makes a whistling swoosh sound. The misidentification of Himalayan wildlife has been proposed as an explanation for some Yeti sightings, a langur monkey living at lower altitudes or the Tibetan blue bear. Some speculate these reported creatures could be present-day specimens of the extinct giant ape Gigantopithecus. However, the Yeti is generally described as bipedal, and most scientists believe Gigantopithecus to have been quadrupedal, and so massive that, unless it evolved specifically as a bipedal ape, walking upright would have been even more difficult for the now extinct primate than it is for its extant quadrupedal relative, the orangutan. The Buru is an aquatic animal featured in a foundation myth of the Apatani people. Stories of the migration of the Apatani to their present location in the Zero Valley of Arunachal Pradesh tell of a swamp occupying the valley, inhabited by fierce, crocodile-like creatures. Draining the swamp, and destroying the creatures allowed them to cultivate fertile paddy fields and settle the valley. The last Buru was said to be reported by a young woman, who sighted it in a spring one night while she was drawing water. The startled lady told her father about the incident. The next day the whole village helped fill the spring with stones and clay. The Ahool is a winged cryptid. Some portrayed the creature as a giant bat while others claim it is flying primate. In 1927, Dr. Ernest Bartels encountered the Ahool again. Bartels was laying in bed, inside his thatched house close to the Jijingkal River in western Java, listening to the sounds of the jungle. Bartels suddenly heard a very different sound coming from almost directly over his hut. This loud and clear cry seemed to utter, Ahool. Although it mainly eats local fauna, such as large fish, it will, opportunistically, occasionally attack humans. Most likely because that the creature animal is extremely territorial and an opportunist, meaning it will attack larger prey when the conditions present itself. The Ibu Gogo are a group of human-like creatures that appear in the folklore of Flores, in Indonesia. The Naj people of Flores describe the Ibu Gogo as having been able walkers and fast runners. There are also legends about the Ibu Gogo kidnapping human children, hoping to learn from them how to cook. The children always easily outwit the Ibu Gogo in the tales. The Umibozu is a sea spirit from Japanese mythology. It dwells in the ocean, usually emerging during storms, and sinks ships, particularly those whose crews speak about it. It's a yokai that appears to fishermen and castaways. They have skin that varies from gray to black, bald heads, a torso that appears to be made out of storm clouds, and serpentine limbs. If they are in a particularly bad mood, they may ask for a barrel to fill with water to drown the crew. The only way to avoid this unfortunate endeavor is to give him a bottomless barrel. There have been rare reports of somewhat small Umibozu appearing in large numbers close to the shore. This is thought to possibly be some sort of odd mating ritual, but is bad for fishermen, as they avoid the water entirely, out of fear, when this happens. This can be devastating to small fishing villages, as they have no other way to get food or money. Cadborosaurus is a sea serpent in the folklore of regions of the Pacific coast of North America. It is said by witnesses to resemble a serpent with vertical coils or humps in tandem behind the horse-like head and long neck, with a pair of small elevating front flippers, and either a pair of hind flippers, or a pair of large webbed hind flippers fused to form a large fan-like tail region that provides powerful forward propulsion. The carcass of a decomposing basking shark is often mistaken for caddy and has fooled experts and laymen. A rotting basking shark may also resemble a decomposing plesiosaur. There have been more than 300 claimed sightings during the past 200 years. Bigfoot in Canadian folklore and American folklore is an ape-like creature that inhabits the forests of North America. According to David Dageling, the legends existed before there was a single name for the creature. They differed in their details both regionally and between families in the same community. Ecologist Robert Pyle argues that most cultures have accounts of human-like giants in their folk history, expressing a need for some larger-than-life creature. Bigfoot has become better known and a phenomenon in popular culture, and sightings have spread throughout North America, but specifically in Windber, PA. Rural areas of the Great Lakes region and the southeastern United States have been sources of numerous reports of Bigfoot sightings, in addition to the Pacific Northwest. The debate over the legitimacy of Bigfoot sightings reached a peak in the 1970s, and Bigfoot has been regarded as the first widely popularized example of pseudoscience in American culture. Various explanations have been suggested for the sightings and to offer conjecture on what type of creature Bigfoot might be. Scientists typically attribute sightings either to hoaxes or to misidentification of known animals and their tracks, particularly black bears. The Wendigo is a mythological creature or evil spirit from the folklore of the First Nations Algonquin tribes based in the northern forests of Canada and in Wisconsin. The Wendigo is described as a monster with some characteristics of a human or as a spirit who has possessed a human being and made them become monstrous. Its influence is said to invoke acts of murder, insatiable greed, cannibalism and the cultural taboos against such behaviors. The creature lends its name to the controversial modern medical term Wendigo psychosis, described by psychiatrists as a culture-bound syndrome with symptoms such as an intense craving for human flesh and fear of becoming a cannibal. In some indigenous communities, environmental destruction and insatiable greed are also seen as a manifestation of Wendigo psychosis. The Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones. With its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets, the Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody. Unclean and suffering from suppuration of the flesh, the Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption. Steller's sea ape is a purported marine mammal, observed by German zoologist Georg Steller on August 1741, in Alaska. The animal was described as being around 5 feet, or 1.5 meters long, with a dog-like head, long drooping whiskers, an elongated but robust body, thick fur coat, and no limbs but for 2 tail fins much like a shark. He described the creature as being playful and inquisitive, much like a monkey. After observing it for 2 hours, he attempted to shoot and collect the creature, but missed, and the creature swam away. However, Steller had made his account before he had ever encountered a fur seal. The thunderbird is a legendary creature in certain North American indigenous peoples' history and culture. It is considered a supernatural being of power and strength. It is especially important, and frequently depicted, in the art, songs and oral histories of many Pacific Northwest coast cultures. In Algonquian mythology, the thunderbird controls the upper world while the underworld is controlled by the underwater panther or great horned serpent. The thunderbird throws lightning at the underworld creatures and creates thunder by flapping its wings. Stories of the thunderbird were based on discoveries of pterosaur fossils by Native Americans. In American folklore, Chessie is a sea monster said to live in the midst of the Chesapeake Bay, similarly to the Loch Ness monster. Over the years there have been many alleged sightings of a serpent-like creature with flippers as part of its body. Although there are alleged photographs of Chessie, there is no genuine evidence of its existence. At least one report of the monster has been identified as a visiting manatee. In Georgia folklore, the Althamaha-ha is a legendary creature, alleged to inhabit the myriad small streams and abandoned rice fields. According to the Brunswick News, the legend has its roots in Muskogee tradition. An alligator gar has been proposed as being a possible identity for recent sightings attributed to the creature. The Bear Lake monster is a being appearing in folklore near Bear Lake. The myth originally grew from articles written in the 19th century by Joseph C. Rich, a Mormon colonizer in the area, purporting to report second-hand accounts of sightings of the creature. In recent years the monster is considered to be a tourist attraction. The last reported sighting of the monster was in 2002. Not all descriptions of the Bear Lake monster agree, but one team of folklorists stated that it is reported to resemble a serpent, but with legs about 18 inches long on which it marauds along the shoreline. In the folklore of South Carolina, the lizard man of Scape Ore Swamp is an entity said to inhabit the swampland of the region. First mentioned in the late 1980s, the purported sightings and damage attributed to the creature yielded a significant amount of newspaper, radio and television publicity. Researcher Ben Radford states that this is a compelling story, but several important aspects wither under skeptical scrutiny. In southern New Jersey and Philadelphia folklore, the Jersey Devil is a legendary creature said to inhabit the Pine Barrens of South Jersey. The creature is often described as a flying biped with hooves, but there are many variations. The common description is that of a bipedal kangaroo-like or wyvern-like creature with a horse or goat-like head, leathery bat-like wings, horns, small arms with clawed hands, legs with cloven hooves, and a forked tail. It has been reported to move quickly and is often described as emitting a high-pitched, blood-curdling scream. The legend states that Mother Leeds had 12 children and, after finding she was pregnant for the 13th time, cursed the child in frustration, crying that the child would be the devil. During 1735, Mother Leeds was in labor on a stormy night while her friends gathered around her. Born as a normal child, the 13th child changed to a creature with hooves, a goat's head, bat wings, and a forked tail. Growling and screaming, it beat everyone with its tail before flying up the chimney and heading into the pines. In Arkansas folklore, the howler is a creature said to dwell in the Ozarks. According to tradition, the creature is bear-like in shape with a gray-colored, shaggy coat. The Fouke monster is said to have been seen in Fouke in Miller County, in Arkansas, during the early 1970s. The creature was accused of attacking a local family. Initial sightings of the creature were concentrated in the Jonesville-Boggy Creek area, where it was blamed for the destruction of local livestock. Later, sightings were reported several hundred miles to the north and the east of Fouke. The monster may initially have been created when misidentified bears were seen and some of the purported tracks may have been forged. The Honey Island swamp monster is described as bipedal, 2 meters tall, with gray hair and yellow or red eyes, and accompanied by a disgusting smell. The first claimed sighting was in 1963 by Harlan Ford, a retired air traffic controller who had taken up wildlife photography. After his death in 1980, a reel of Super 8 film showing the creature was found among his belongings. The idea of a large, ape-like creature in the area is not without its critics, notably the local ecologist Paul Wagner who, with his wife Sue, run nature tours in the area. Neither they nor their Cajun guide, Robbie Charbonnet, have seen any evidence for it. The skunk ape is a humanoid creature said to inhabit some southeastern U.S. states, with reports from Florida being most common. It is named for its appearance and unpleasant odor. The skunk ape is reported to resemble the Sasquatch of the Pacific Northwest, but is typically shorter in comparison, has long patches of fur on the shoulders and arms similar to an orangutan, and is often described as a mottled rusty red color as opposed to the Sasquatch's brown or black coloration. During the COVID-19 pandemic, several Florida businesses have used the skunk ape's reported foul smell giving incentive to remain at a distance and evasive nature to promote social distancing. The Dover demon is a creature reportedly sighted in the town of Dover, in Massachusetts on April 1977. 17-year-old William Bill Bartlett, Mike Mazzocca and Andy Brody claimed that while driving, he saw a large-eyed creature, with tendril-like fingers, and glowing eyes on top of a broken stone wall on Farm Street in Dover. The teenagers all drew sketches of the alleged creature. Bartlett wrote on his sketch, "I swear on a stack of Bibles that I saw this creature." Some suggested that the creature may have been a foal or a moose calf. Police told the Associated Press that creatures reported by the teenagers were probably nothing more than a school vacation hoax. On November 1966, 5 men who were digging a grave at a cemetery near Clendenin, in West Virginia, claimed to have seen a man-like figure fly low from the trees over their heads. This is often identified as the first known sighting of what became known as the Mothman. During the next few days, other people reported similar sightings. 2 volunteer firemen who saw it said it was a large bird with red eyes. After the December 1967 collapse of the Silver Bridge and the death of 46 people, the incident gave rise to the legend and connected the Mothman sightings to the bridge collapse. Folklorist Jan Harold Brunvand notes that Mothman has been widely covered in the popular press, some claiming sightings connected with UFOs, and others claiming that a military storage site was Mothman's home. He notes that recountings of the 1966-67 Mothman reports usually state that at least 100 people saw Mothman, with many more afraid to report their sightings, but observed that written sources for such stories consisted of children's books or sensationalized or undocumented accounts that fail to quote identifiable persons. Brunvand found elements in common among many Mothman reports and much older folk tales, suggesting that something real may have triggered the scares and became woven with existing folklore. The chupacabra is a legendary creature in the folklore of parts of the Americas, with its first purported sightings reported in Puerto Rico in 1995. The name comes from the animal's reported vampirism. The chupacabra is said to attack and drink the blood of livestock, including goats. Physical descriptions of the creature vary. It is purportedly a heavy creature the size of a small bear, with a row of spines reaching from the neck to the base of the tail. Eyewitness sightings have been claimed in Puerto Rico, and have since been reported as far north as Maine, as far south as Chile, and even outside the Americas in countries. Many of the reports have been disregarded as uncorroborated or lacking evidence. Sightings in northern Mexico and the southern United States have been verified as canids afflicted by mange. According to biologists and wildlife management officials, the chupacabra is an urban legend. The minhação is a creature from Brazilian folklore that is variously claimed to be a large fish or to resemble a worm measuring 20 to 50 or even to 80 meters. The minhação was described to European explorers and naturalists in the 19th century by locals in Brazil. French naturalist Augustin Saint-Hilaire described in December 1846 accounts of the minhação in the Padre Aranda and Faya lakes, with claims that they lived in the lakes and had often dragged horses and horned cattle under the water. The minhação has been blamed, without sightings, for damage to local roads and the appearance of deep trenches that appear after long spells of rainy weather. Claims of a rumbling sound like thunder accompanying its movement led to suggestions that the Minhasau was simply being used as an explanation for seismic activity in the area. This rumbling sound was also claimed to presage a period of rainy weather. In Brazilian folklore, the Mapinguari is a monstrous entity said to live in the Amazon rainforest. Depictions of the Mapinguari vary. Sometimes it is described as a hairy humanoid cyclops, while others claim it to be similar to the giant ground sloth, an animal extinct for thousands of years, but which some believe the Mapinguari to be a cultural memory of. The creature is often said to have a gaping mouth on its abdomen. Congamados are large pterosaur-like cryptid living in semi-tropical regions of Africa. It resembles a pastiche of folkloric flying monsters. Its name means, breaker of boats or, overturner of boats, as the Congamados are said to have capsized the canoes of natives and attacked people who ventured too close to the nearby rivers. It is interesting to note that a good portion of modern Congamado sightings happen in a prime birdwatching site, and yet birdwatchers never report anything, indicating that Congamado may in fact be a case of mistaken identity. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, European explorers ventured into the jungles of West Africa and found dozens of undiscovered species like the bongo and the okapi. Along with confirmed species, they also brought back tales of bizarre beasts that they learned of only through African legends or brief glimpses along the shores of steamy jungle rivers. There are dozens such creatures, but the dingonik takes the prize as the weirdest of them. It is said to be a carnivore that can choose to hunt or devour nearly whatever it wants save for elephants. This is because of it having tusks that are over a meter long and being so large, ferocious and aggressive that even large bull hippos fall prey to it. In East African folklore, the Nandi bear is a creature said to live in East Africa. It takes its name from the Nandi people who live in western Kenya, in the area the Nandi bear is reported from. Descriptions of the Nandi bear are of a ferocious, powerfully built carnivore with high front shoulders and a sloping back. Stories of the Nandi bear state that it is fierce, nocturnal, stands on its hind legs and can kill animals. There is no scientific evidence that the Nandi bear exists. Alleged sightings are suggested to be misidentification of known species. The Emela-Ntouka is a cryptid reported from across west-central Africa, described as a hairless elephant-sized animal with a crocodile-like tail and a large horn on its nose. Lucien Blancu first proposed the theory that the Emela-Ntouka could be an unknown species of large, semi-aquatic forest rhinoceros. It leaves tracks very similar to those of a rhinoceros, with 3 toes or claw marks, except they are the size of an elephant's tracks. Despite its herbivorous diet, it is also said to be very aggressive and foul-tempered, killing elephants, buffaloes, and hippopotami which wander into its territory by tearing, stabbing, and puncturing them with its horn. In Congo River Basin mythology, Mokele-Mbembe is a water-dwelling entity, sometimes described as a living creature, sometimes as a spirit. During the early 20th century, descriptions of the entity increasingly reflected public fascination with dinosaurs, including aspects of particular dinosaur species now known among scientists to be incorrect, and the entity became increasingly described alongside a number of purported living dinosaurs in Africa. Over time, the entity became a point of focus in particular among adherents of the pseudoscience of cryptozoology, and young Earth creationism, resulting in numerous expeditions led by cryptozoologists and funded by young Earth creationists and groups with the aim of finding evidence that invalidates scientific consensus regarding evolution. Paleontologist Donald Prothero remarks that, the quest for Mokele-Mbembe is part of the effort by creationists to overthrow the theory of evolution and teaching of science by any means possible. Additionally, Prothero observes that, the only people looking for Mokele-Mbembe are creationist ministers, not wildlife biologists. In New Zealand folklore, the Waitoriki is an otter-beaver-like creature. It is usually described as a small otter-like animal that lives in the South Island of New Zealand. There are many theories on the Waitoriki's true identity, such as it being an otter, beaver or pinniped. Evidence for the existence of the Waitoriki is mainly based on sporadic accounts of an unidentified amphibious animal in the country's South Island spanning well over 200 years. The Waitoriki would be most remarkable if it exists, due to the fact that New Zealand is one of the few significant land masses on Earth to have no recent native land mammals. The bunyip is a creature of Aboriginal mythology. It lives in swamps, riverbeds and waterholes all over Australia. Aborigines used to tell tales of creatures that stalked the waterways and ate any prey item that come close, and the creatures had developed a taste for people, mostly children. Many of the modern sightings that have come from Australian people come in a wide variety of descriptions. One of the first recorded accounts of the bunyip took place in 1818, when James Meehan and explorer Hamilton Hume both found enormous bones in Lake Bathurst, located in New South Wales of Australia. They described the creature similar to a manatee or a hippopotamus. It is believed the bunyip could also be a surviving diprotodon. Yowie is a fanged humanoid marsupial or great ape, featured in Aboriginal mythology. It is considered to be the Australian Bigfoot, and contain many primate-like features, possibly indicating that it is an undiscovered species of great ape or prehistoric human. The yowie is described as being one of the most aggressive Sasquatch species, and has been reported tearing heads off of kangaroos and dogs. It has been seen attacking humans as well. Some cryptozoologists theorize that the yowie could be some form of